Hello everyone, Canadian Business Guru back with my third video. So the topic I want to cover today is an important one for businesses, and that is the role of capital. What it is, its role in the survival and growth of your business, and how you get capital, and what forms your capital structure can take and how that can affect the survival and growth of your business. So when you're starting a business, you need resources. And so capital refers to the physical and financial resources that you use to run your business and to build your business and get customers. So it can be on the physical side, it can be everything that you see behind me in this office. So all my inventory, all my equipment, my computers that I showed you, the house that I'm operating in here that provides me my office space, the car that I drive to take the mail to the post office, the envelopes that I have on the shelf up there that I use to mail out my orders to customers. Those are all elements of what we call physical capital. Okay, then there's financial capital. So financial capital is actual money. And the best way to think of capital from a business standpoint is that they're the building blocks of your business. If you want to use an analogy, a human body analogy, capital is the cells that build up the business. Without capital, you cannot build a sustainable business that can meet the demands and expectations of your customers, pay all your suppliers on time, pay employees on time, and face and pivot with competitive pressures and economic pressures that come at you from outside. So if you read in newspapers and on the internet and in magazines about corporate bankruptcies, the number one reason why most businesses fail within the first 5 years is due to a lack of capital, to undercapitalization. And the biggest reason for that, why a business is undercapitalized, is because the owner underestimates vastly the amount of capital it's going to take to build their business to the point where it can make money. And oftentimes what happens is the owner is unable to access enough sources of capital to be able to get to a sufficient level of capital to sustain the business. Another analogy you can use is the concept of rolling a ball or a boulder up a hill. If you don't have enough capital, you've rolled the boulder up to the crest of the hill, but you failed to crest the hill and you ran out of energy, and guess what? You drop the boulder and it rolls down and crushes you. Right? You need to have enough capital to get it to crest over the hill so that momentum can take it down the other side. And that's really what having enough capital in a business represents. Now, so we've talked about physical and financial capital. So then there's a concept in accounting of what we call capital maintenance. And capital maintenance refers to sort of homeostasis, where a business is able to maintain a certain level of physical and financial capital. And if it's able to maintain a constant level of physical and financial capital, then it has stability because it's able to face all the challenges that come at it, either in terms of unexpected costs, competitive pressures that require it to access resources to pivot, or other such things. In accounting, physical and financial capital maintenance have to do with keeping a set of books in such a way that provisions are made automatically in the accounts to essentially segregate resources to meet the demands of maintaining financial and physical capital. So making sure every time you have sales that you put enough away to maintain the physical and financial capital of your business before you expand or before you take any money out to spend personally is an example of that. So we talk about maintenance. Now, what about sources of capital? So this topic, sources of capital, is where you as an entrepreneur are going to face your first major disconnect with your family members and your friends and the people around you who are not running businesses. So there are really just two sources of capital to a business. The first source is debt, okay, loans, whether they come from banks, whether they come from your credit cards, whether they come from lines of credit, whether they come from a mortgage on your house, whether they come from family and friends and private individuals. Those are all sources of debt, and those are all sources of capital. Then there's equity. Okay, equity refers to capital invested in your business that gives the owners of that capital the right to participate in the profits of the enterprise. So capital can be either internal, which is retained money that you have reinvested in your business as it grows and as it succeeds, or it can be capital that's been contributed into the business by external individuals in exchange for shares of the business. And, when you're starting a business, you don't really have access to internal capital until your business is profitable. And for most businesses, that's a minimum of 5 to 6 years from the time of inception. So, when you're starting your business out, other than your own capital contribution that you can make from savings and money that you have personally to invest in the business, all of your capital is going to come either from people investing in your business by taking shares or by giving your business loans. And so unless and until you become profitable enough that you are able to completely self-finance and completely pay off debts and buy out shareholders, your business is always going to have some level of debt or equity for the most part. And in fact, for very sophisticated business people and investors, even if they have their own money and they have the money to be able to take out investors, oftentimes if they're very good at investing their money or their business makes a lot of money, they will often opt to keep the levels of debt and equity investment in place because they're able to achieve much greater profitability with their own capital compared with what they're paying out to debt holders. So this is really where you're going to face your first major difference. Turn this off because it's my microphone, because it's actually running out of battery. I think I still got pretty good sound, I think, without it. So most of your family members, your friends, your relatives, the people that you've grown up with will have raised you to view debt as a bad thing and as an indication of an inability to delay gratification, living beyond your means. The only exception to that really is debts that are taken out to buy a house or to buy a car. And even a car is often pushing it with most older people. They don't tend to view debt the same way a business person or business people view debt. And that is that it's an essential part of running a business, and quite often it's preferable to equity. Now, why would it be preferable to have debts as opposed to equity investment? Well, the simple reason is limitation on the amounts paid out. If I take a loan for $100,000 and I have an 8% interest rate on that loan, then my creditor only gets $8,000 a year on the debt, plus the return of the principal. So if I am able to take that $100,000 and I'm able to grow a business into a $500,000 a year business that nets a profit of, let's see, $150,000 a year, um, that debtor is still only getting $8,000 a year plus whatever interest or whatever principal payment I'm making on that debt. They don't get a portion of the growth or the profitability that I've been able to achieve through my hard work. On the other hand, if I have a shareholder, and I do right now in my company, my former partner is a silent shareholder who owns 10% of my shares. So if I decide to declare a dividend to myself at the end of the year of $40,000, say, well, he automatically gets a $4,000 dividend because he owns 10% of the shares. So he doesn't get it unless I declare the dividends. But eventually, if I'm successful and I'm building my company up, eventually I'm going to take the money out. And I'm going to want to use it for personal things like taking vacations or doing work on the house or buying some stamps for my own personal collection or, you know, building up retirement savings or doing whatever it is that you would do with the money that you make and the profits that you make as a business person. And when I take it out at that time, an equity holder is entitled to a percentage of that. And they're entitled to it forever, as long as they own the shares. So equity is often a very attractive proposition up front when you're starting a business because it doesn't require you to make immediate payments. It doesn't put contractual obligations on you to make payments, but it becomes very, very costly on the back end when you go to take money out of your company. And the other thing is, if depending on how much ownership you give away to equity holders when you're raising money, if you retain too little ownership, your investor group can influence, they can put a significant amount of pressure on you to modify or abandon some of your operating decisions if they don't like what you're doing. There's a certain point, and I'm not sure what it is, I think it's 25 or 30%, where, you know, once you have minority ownership that exceeds that percentage, you have to have shareholders meetings, you have to have annual general meetings, you have to inform your shareholders of what's happening with the business. Um, you have to give them a chance to vote in meetings. You have to have resolutions and formally document a lot of the decisions that are being made by the business. You don't really have to do that if you own 90% or more, which is what I have in my situation. I mean, I've got a shareholders agreement in place as well that basically outlines that, you know, this particular shareholder is a silent shareholder. He doesn't have any involvement in the day-to-day affairs of the business. He doesn't really have to be consulted on any of the decisions I'm making. He's simply entitled to 10% of the money that I take out whenever I take it out. So in his case, there's not a huge amount of interference at all, or really any. And that's an okay situation in terms of control. But if you, as an entrepreneur, want to have the freedom to run your business the way you see fit and to be able to stay the course when you're taking a course of action or following a strategy that's not yielding immediate results, um, it's important that you have control of the company and that you're not bound by legal obligations to bowing to pressure from investors who may not understand or appreciate the long term nature of the types of strategies that you're following and may pressure you to pivot or go in different directions when you know that it's not feasible to do so. Um, so that's a very important distinction between debt and equity and why debt is often preferable. Debt holders have no say in your business unless they have you sign a promissory note or a specific loan agreement that specifically gives them that power. They don't have any inherent power to influence how you're running your business. The only thing they care about is that you pay them on time and that you make the interest and principal payments. So it's often essential and ideal for a business to have debt. And it's obviously not good for it to have too much debt. It has to have a debt ratio that's enough to provide the business the capital it needs, um, and a payment arrangement that the business can handle. So that's going to get into the topic of my next video, which is going to be cash flow, which is completely separate from debt. There's nothing wrong with having very high debt as long as the payment requirements are not excessive and not outside what the business's cash flows can handle. Um, Having a lot of debt is not by itself a bad thing. It does obviously increase risk for the business the more debt that it has because it will have to generate more cash to make the payments on those debts. But as long as the payments are set up properly and they're not overly onerous, um, then a business will have no trouble if it's profitable making those payments. Um, so that I think will cover this topic now. I think adequately for capital. Um, it is very crucial um, when you start a business that you raise enough capital. Now that I think is also a topic for another video because that gets into how do you forecast that, how do you determine how much is enough, and how do you deal with a situation where you realize that you haven't raised enough, and that's a separate topic. So I'll cover that in another video. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and hang in there.